Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping back in time, way back actually, to a really fascinating period in American history, 1754 to 1800.
A formative era.
Exactly. We're going to unpack how a new American identity, actually started taking shape during those crucial years. We'll explore how culture, art, even big societal shifts started moving away from just purely European influences, building something unique, something American. We've been sifting through a stack of sources, and honestly, we're excited to share some of the, unexpected ways this identity was forged.
And the sources we've pulled together, they really offer a pretty comprehensive look. You see the continuities, but also the really significant changes happening then. They show how these emerging ideas about national identity weren't just like abstract theories. They found vivid expression everywhere, in homes, in government, on canvas even.
Right.
So our goal today is really to give you a solid understanding of this incredibly dynamic period. See how these ideas actually, lived and breathed.
Okay, so diving into this period, one of the most, striking transformations actually happened right inside the home. It's this redefinition of women's roles through something called Republican motherhood.
Yes.
It sounds almost, paradoxical.
Yeah.
Was it truly empowering for women, or was it more like a clever way to keep them in a domestic role, just with maybe a fancier title?
Well, it was profound, actually. The core idea was that mothers were absolutely crucial, vital, really, for influencing political ideas. Their main role, almost seen as sacred, was raising virtuous sons, sons educated in the principles of liberty. Benjamin Rush's 1787 essay on female education was a really key text laying this out.
And what's so interesting, maybe even unintentionally, is that this focus on Republican mothers actually led to a real push for women's education.
It did.
You saw actual results, like Massachusetts setting up elementary education for all kids in 1789, and a real boom in academies just for girls. Was that the plan all along, or just a sort of happy accident?
Well, it's vital to acknowledge the limitations here, though, big limitations. While educational opportunities certainly expanded for white women, this was still a long, long way from modern women's rights.
Right. Not equality as we think of it.
Not at all. And crucially, it did not extend to black women. Most were enslaved or, working as domestic servants. Nor did it really apply to American Indian women. Their influence in many communities often diminished as conflicts increased, elevating the roles of men as warriors, as diplomats.
When I first read about Republican motherhood, it felt like a classic 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing for women. But then you see figures like Judith Sargent Murray popping up, and she's pushing for much more independence, arguing women should be able to, get the necessities of life on their own. Was that just bound to happen? Or was it more like these trailblazers taking the idea and running with it in a really radical way?
It's truly a powerful nuance, and maybe one of the most surprising twists of this whole era. Think about it. An idea basically designed to confine women to the home, right? To make them serve the state's needs.
Yeah.
It inadvertently sows the seeds for their future liberation. By saying women were thinkers, that they were educators, even in that narrow frame, it kind of unlocked this potential for agency, a potential that, honestly, few people back then probably could have predicted. It's almost like the attempt to define and limit them accidentally gave them a platform, a voice.
That's fascinating. And it's amazing how these shifting social dynamics, like Republican motherhood, started to ripple outward. You can almost see this new identity literally taking shape in the art, the literature, even the buildings at the time, can't you?
Exactly.
Let's turn to that. How was this distinct American character being painted and written and built?
Okay, yeah. So in the art world, you had figures like Charles Willson Peale playing these really crucial roles. He was famous for his portraits. George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, those types. But his works weren't just, good likenesses. They actively shaped a visual national identity. They focused on Enlightenment values, reason, innovation, those new Republican virtues. He was basically showing Americans who they were supposed to be.
Like creating the ideal American image.
Precisely. And then you contrast that with someone like John Trumbull.
Right. He took a different approach, maybe more emotional.
Absolutely. Trumbull focused on big historical events, but he painted them with a very romanticized brush. His signing of the Declaration of Independence, for instance, it wasn't strictly accurate historically. Details were off.
But that wasn't really the point, was it?
No, exactly. It was about creating, almost manufacturing, a collective memory, stirring up this powerful sense of nationalistic feeling, helping people see this as their epic moment. Less about fact, more about the feeling, the myth.
Yeah.
And then, remarkably, You also had artists like Samuel Jones. He actually broke the mold a bit by including women and black people in his paintings of American culture, which was pretty unusual, a subtle but significant statement.
So moving beyond the visual arts, what about the stories, the common sayings, the narratives that were shaping how Americans thought about themselves? How did literature play into this?
Oh, literature was hugely powerful in crafting this identity. Think about Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac.
Everyone read that, right?
Wildly popular. And its little sayings, its aphorisms like a penny saved is a penny earned, they weren't just practical advice. They helped forge an identity of industrious, thrifty, hardworking people. And then you have Hector St. John de Crèvecoeur. In 1782, he literally asks, what is an American? And he tries to define this new man. Someone free from European aristocracy, culturally diverse, connected to nature, connected to labor.
Wow.
He emphasized things like egalitarian values, religious plurality, building prosperity through just sheer hard work. It was like an aspirational blueprint for being American.
A blueprint. I like that.
And then for maybe a darker, more complex reflection, you have Charles Brockden Brown's Wyland. It came out in 1798. It's considered the first American Gothic novel. And it really digs into the anxieties bubbling up in this new nation, the tension between, say, rationalism and maybe the darker side of the human mind, and the challenge of creating a national literature that was distinct from Europe.
And it wasn't just words and pictures. Even the buildings they put up told a story about who they were becoming. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? A nation rejecting European kings still borrowed so heavily from, like, Greek and Roman architecture for its own big buildings.
It is ironic, but it also speaks to that deep need for legitimacy, right? For projecting a sense of permanence, of seriousness, especially for a brand new country.
Trying to look established.
Exactly. Trying to project stability, not just constant revolution.
Yeah.
So the dominant style was federal architecture, which, like you said, drew heavily on European classical revival. You look at Thomas Jefferson's Monticello or the First Bank of the United States built in 1797. This wasn't just about looking nice. It was a deliberate choice. Symbolic.
Nice.
Strength, order, the authority of this new national government. It was meant to convey stability and unity to a public that was still, figuring things out. They needed to believe this new government was solid, that it would last.
Right, makes sense. Okay, shifting gears just a bit, but still on this theme of core identity, religion. How did a nation founded on liberty define its relationship with faith? Because religious freedom really became a cornerstone of this emerging American identity, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely foundational.
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson's Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom was truly pivotal here. It laid the groundwork for separating church and state in a way that was honestly pretty revolutionary for the time.
How so?
Well, it explicitly said people couldn't be forced to support a church with their tax money, or even forced to go to church at all. And maybe even more importantly, it enshrined this idea that the government could not violate an individual's conscience when it came to faith. That was a profound commitment, a very uniquely American idea at the time, a major break from how things worked in Europe.
That's a powerful ideal. But did that ideal, that concept of religious freedom, did it actually extend to everyone right from the start? Or were there immediate limits, like we saw with Republican motherhood?
Well, it certainly opened doors for many people, quite significantly, in fact. You have figures like Alvin Pamphlet, who was the first known Black Baptist preacher ordained in America. His story highlights how religion became this really powerful avenue for marginalized voices, a way for them to articulate a broader American identity, often rooted in the ideas of the Great Awakening and those revolutionary values of individual liberty and spiritual equality. It gave a platform to people who often didn't have one anywhere else.
So as we wrap up here, it's just so clear this period, 1754 to 1800, was this incredibly dynamic time, a real crucible maybe, where the very idea of an American identity was being forged.
A crucible is a good word for it.
And it wasn't just through politics and revolutions, but through these evolving social roles like Republican motherhood, through art, literature, and these foundational legal principles like religious freedom.
It truly highlights how a nation quite consciously and creatively really built its own identity, almost from the ground up, moving beyond its colonial past to define its own unique character, its own core values. It was a period of deliberate invention in many ways, active creation.
Which leaves us with a pretty big thought, I think. What does it actually mean for a nation to invent its own identity?
Yeah.
And maybe more personally for you listening, how much of that original invention, with all its amazing ideals, but also its, built-in limitations, how much of that still resonates today? Or perhaps clashes with what American means to you right now?
Yeah.
Something to think about.